Turning now to politics, a savage attack by Hamas on Israel. The war in Ukraine rages on, the house in chaos at a time when aid is needed most, all giving fuel to the narrative pushed by Russia and China that our democracy is in utter disarray. Here to discuss this and more, as she does every Thursday, is Caroline Heldman, professor of critical theory and social justice at Occidental College. Good morning, Caroline.
Good morning, Giselle.
So the world is on fire. A horrific attack by Hamas, Ukraine off the headlines. But the war there rages on, as you know. A government shutdown looming. Republicans cannot agree who should be Speaker of the House. Put into context what we're seeing here.
Well, I think you did a great job talking about the importance of having a functioning government. And it's just so strange that essentially 8 extremist Republicans in the House of Representatives have brought our government to a grinding halt at just the moment where we need to be passing laws and funding for Ukraine, for Israel. It really strikes at the importance of having a functioning democracy and being able to have a presence on the world stage that is stable and reliable, and that is not what we have right now because the Republican Party kind of punched itself in the face last week.
Yeah, and the Republican candidate for Speaker right now, Steve Scalise, does not appear to have the votes. He's considered the more moderate candidate, but voted to overturn the election and once called himself the David Duke without baggage. Will he be able to convince the far right to support him? And if so, won't he be just as beholden to them as McCarthy was?
Absolutely. He will have to, whoever gets that seat is going to be beholden to these extremists, and that's what we can call them because they do not represent the Republican Party. And as you noted, Steve Scalise, right, is saying he's like a leader of the KKK without the baggage. He had to apologize for meeting with white supremacists early in his career. This is a man who still denies that the 2020 election was free and fair, and he is the moderate candidate. It really speaks to the power of this very small group of extremists in the Republican Party right now.
Jim Jordan did not win, obviously, the vote, despite being Trump's backed candidate. Trump has been bumped off the headline for the first time in what seems like years. But what does that tell you, that Jordan didn't get the Republican vote?
Well, I think this is much more of an internal fight. So I'm not sure how much outside endorsements matter, even from someone as popular as Trump in the Republican Party.
What happens if neither of these candidates get the vote? What could happen? Who could emerge as a potential candidate?
Well, that's anybody's question. The fact that Steve Scalise, who is pretty extreme, is still not extreme enough for this bloc says something. The big question for me is whether or not Republicans will let this play out as they did with Kevin McCarthy on the floor in the eye of the public, or whether they will try to manage it behind closed doors. Scalise got 113 votes, but he needs 217, and there are a number of supporters of Jim Jordan who say they simply will not vote for him. So at this point in time, it's anyone's guess as to what happens, but I assume this will be dragged out for a bit.
Do you see any scenario, or is it totally delusional to think that perhaps Democrats and Republicans could, in this crisis moment when they're needed most, come together on any front?
I would doubt it, Giselle. We didn't see that. They didn't save, McCarthy as some imagine they would. It's just not the way party politics works. The Democrats aren't going to do the Republicans any favor. The Republicans haven't done Democrats any favor. It would be unprecedented for them to get together at a time like this.
President Biden's foreign policy experience on full display, even Netanyahu praising the president's leadership. Has this moment potentially changed the narrative for Biden?
It's possible, at least for now, although in presidential elections, it is very rare for foreign policy to matter at all. And the only time that it does is when the U.S. is directly involved. For example, the rally around the flag effect after 9/11. So Biden might get a bump in the polls if we look at the political implications of this. But really, this election will be about domestic issues.
All right, let's turn to this horrific war. ISIS-like savagery, women raped, children killed, people beheaded, as Israelis prepare for an onslaught, the likes which we've not seen, inflaming U.S.-Arab relations with vitriol on both sides. Put into context this escalation and what it means for us here at home.
Well, I know a lot of people are glued to their television sets or listening to the latest news updates. This is being, Biden is framing this as the worst attack since the thing that has happened to the Jews since the Holocaust. it certainly has reverberations of the Yom Kippur War in 1973, where 2,600 civilians lost their lives, although that number will likely be much higher. Israeli leadership is framing this as their 9/11, and obviously our hearts are with them on this. The savagery of the attacks, as you pointed out, Giselle, means that good people around the world are with Israel right now.
Secretary of State Antony Blinken spoke this morning, fully backing Israel, but stressed the importance of the distinction between Hamas and the Palestinian people. How important is that distinction right now?
It is of great importance. There are 11,000 Hamas members. There are 2.3 million Palestinians who may have some of the same ideology, but don't share the tactics. And so these are civilians who are caught in the crossfire, who don't have, food supplies right now, who don't have energy, who are facing bombardments from above, entire blocks removed, who will likely be facing a ground war, and they have nowhere to go. They are landlocked. So there's a big difference between these terrorists and the people in the Gaza Strip right now.
Yeah, and all while anti-Semitism is running rampant on social media. Even Black Lives Matter Chicago posted this image of a paratrooper saying it stands with Israel. The backlash to BLM Chicago has been swift. But what's at risk once Israel goes into Gaza and looks like the aggressor, not the ones defending themselves?
Well, what's at risk is the same thing that happened after 9/11 with the U.S., where, we overreacted. We drew in Iraq. 315,000 civilians in Iraq were killed as a result of how we reacted to 9/11. And I think that what's at stake here is precisely the complexity that you are introducing into this, Giselle, which is that we should all be agreeing that civilian casualties, especially in the brutal manner that Hamas murdered people, civilian casualties on both sides should be something we want to prevent.
It's just been horrific and sad and heartbreaking. Caroline Heldman, professor of critical theory and social justice at Occidental College, thank you so much for joining us and lending us your vital expertise on these really important issues. Thank you.